Implementing and revising. Let me say that again. Welcome to California EL Civics Basics, Understanding, Implementing, and Revising COAAPs. Glad to have you here with us today. Um, this is a session for probably new users, although I think this is the first time I've sort of gathered everything all in one place. So if you're an experienced user, you might be getting everything, just a review of what you already know. But if you've been around for a long time, this may be a little bit of more than a little bit of a repetition for you. If you're not from California, I would suggest this isn't the session for you, but I'm doing a session at 9:45 tomorrow, which would explain our EL Civics system in general. So if you're from out of state, that would be the session for you. This one is really the basic rules for California WIOA 2 funded agencies. Um, so glad to have you here. I'm going to take questions periodically. But feel free to put your questions in the chat and I will go there. And if you want to put your name and agency in the chat too, that would be great. Um, and also, if you want to let me know what your role is at your agency, that would also be great. So I know what kind of responsibilities you have. So going over our goals and objectives at the end of this session, you'll be able to select civic objectives and additional assessment plans if that's your role, or know how to do it in case that isn't yet your designated role. And then implement COAAP instruction and assessment at your agency. And identify the important aspects of developing integrated EL Civics or IELCE 243 COAAPs or programs. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to be talking about how to revise COAAPs, etc. So I've got some newbies here. Thank you. And I know I've got some accountability specialists. Good. Just to tell you, accountability specialists, I do have a section at the end of the PowerPoint on data collection and submission. We may not have time for that section, but I put it in the slides in case you needed that information. So you might want to look there. All the slides are uploaded to the HOOVA site, and they will be on the CASAS site very soon. So I wanted to do a review. Why don't you raise your hand if you were at my earlier session on requirements? And let me see if I can see you. If you'll I'm sorry, not raise your hand, but do give me a thumbs up on your reactions, if you would. Let me see if I can run through that and just see. Okay. Okay, only a few of you. So those of you who were at my session previously, you maybe have this information already, and those of you who've been doing it, but if you're a newbie, you'll need this information. I'm just giving a very brief overview about the WIOA 2 system, so you may need to go back and view the EL Civics Basics COAAP requirements, or IELCE and civic participation requirements. Today we're going to just talk about selecting COAAPs, but I'm going to give you this quick review. And just to say that our EL Civics system for civic participation and IELCE are based on a system of civic objectives, and those are general competencies that help students access their community. There's an example of COAAP 33, Civic Objective 33 there, about obtaining and keeping a job. There are 59 civic objectives, numbered 1 through 54, and 70 through 75. Number 41 happens to be deleted. All 59 civic objectives can be used for 231 funding, but if you have the special 243 funding, which is workforce oriented, only 9 of them are usable for 243 programs. And there is a civic objectives list. All the links I show you here, when you download the PDF, you'll be able to go directly to them. And they're all links to the CASAS website. So there are 7 areas within which our civic objectives live. You can see them here: consumer economics, community resources, health, employment, government and law, transition, and workforce training. Let me just go to your messages real quick and see if there's any questions already. Okay, good. And within the civic objectives, we have the COAAPs, or Civic Objectives and Additional Assessment Plans. They are a plan for performance-based assessment. Our system is all based around performance-based instruction and assessment. And the COAAP is an additional assessment plan, and that additional is because it's additional to the CASAS testing, or standardized testing, that we give here in California. So a COAAP might have 2 tasks, for example here: complete a job application and demonstrate successful job interview techniques. There are multiple COAAPs for each civic objective. We have 164 in all, and you can see them at the pre-approved additional assessment plan list, again linked here, or you can find it at the website. Okay, and if we have time at the end, I can take you to some of these places. So now I want to go directly to COAAP selection, because that's what this is about. Can you maximize the window of the PowerPoint? I think I am maximized. Aileen, maybe you can do that, or maybe you need to do that in your Zoom at home. I think I am maximized as much as, let me see if I can check this, but I appreciate you letting us know.
In my screen, it shows that you have your PowerPoint a little smaller. If you can make it a little bigger on the top.
Is that helping it?
Let me see. There. There you go.
Okay. Well, how about that?
Yes, it's
Okay, sorry. Thank you for letting me know. I'm so sorry. I didn't realize that it wasn't as big as it should be. I appreciate it. Okay, so if you saw the presentation earlier, it went back. Okay, let me see, because I can't have it.
Let's see.
I have to have it. I can't have it. I have to be able to see other things. So does that not big for you? I have to be able to see the chat and everything. So
okay.
Anyways, I think that's as big as I can make it. Is that not big?
This is okay. This is okay, Lori.
Okay. I'm so sorry. Gosh, I really thought I was being full screen for you, and I'm not sure why it's not. But thank you. Let me see if I can have it in the background. Bigger. Let's see if that will work. I have to be able to see everything else. I can't, also. So that's the problem. Let's see if that's good. Okay, that's the best I can do, I think. I'm sorry. So anyways, I wanted to show you the 7 requirements for civic participation in IELCE programs. We're going to be dealing with number 2 and 3 and 4 today. So the one in green here, select civic objectives and additional assessment plans, but I want you to know that it's within the requirements of the program. So, but before you select COAAPs, you have to do a community needs assessment, because our system is all based on community needs assessment. And as we know, successful programs continually assess the needs, interests, and language skills of their learners. So that's a crucial part of our EL Civics program. So I'm going to assume that you've done that. Again, if you don't know how to do that, you can look at the other training, basic requirements of IELCE and civic participation. But today we're going to move right to the selection process. So you select COAAPs based on needs assessment. And the COAAPs, again, are plans for performance-based assessment in instruction. Each plan, or COAAP, is a plan to give learners 30 hours of instruction in content specifically related to the COAAP, and then assess them on that information. And each agency is required to select between 3 and 10. Again, if you want to select fewer than 3 or more than 10, you need to get permission from your CD consultant. With a brief description of why you want that. No request, as far as I know, has ever been denied. So don't be afraid to do that. It's just one of our rules. So there are 3 COAAP selection options. Option 1 is pre-approved COAAPs. Those are ones that are already made up for you just to select and then base your assessment on them. But our system is a dynamic and a flexible system, so if you want to revise what you see on the pre-approved site or make up your own assessment plan, you can do that and submit it into option 2. Option 3 are for new things, new civic objectives that, for example, we've never used before. All of the workforce training that's new, those would be option 3s, as well as a number of years ago, Torrance Adult School did digital literacy. It was a new thing at the time in the 90s. And, well, not in the 90s, I'm sorry. It was around 2007, I think, that they did that. So that would be an example of a new COAAP. So again, COAAPs must be selected at the site, and after selection, they must be downloaded in TE. So those of you who are staff, data staff members, remember to have your teachers select and then let you know what they've selected so that you can download it into TE as soon as they do select. Okay, so let's talk about option 1, pre-approved. So I guess I didn't mention previously, but I just want you to know that all of these pre-approved COAAPs were developed by agencies. They are not developed by the state. Our system comes from the ground up, from the field up. Everything that you see was developed by agencies and then put in a system that everyone could access so they wouldn't have to reinvent the wheel. So these are plans or assessments that agencies have written and use in their agencies. They may or may not be right for your agency. You need to evaluate that. If they're not right, then you have the opportunity in option 2 to revise them. So just as an explanation of the COAAP, each one is numbered. The first number corresponds to the civic objective. So number 1 is for civic objective 1. And then 1.4, 1.5, etc. are 2 different assessment plans. And each plan includes assessment tasks that learners must complete to demonstrate what they've learned. And there are at least 2 tasks per student, or per level, I should say. And students need to do all of the tasks that are labeled for their level. And just so you know, portfolio tasks have more than 2 tasks per learner very often. So when you, after you've done your needs assessment, you want to select COAAPs that most closely match the needs of your learners and your program. And you need to consider the type of assessment related to the language skills. So are you going to have an oral assessment, a written assessment, or role play? Depending on what the students want to learn, you can choose your type. You also might be choosing based on the number of assessors you have, and maybe if you only have 1 assessor, it might be hard to do an oral assessment, so you might select a written assessment. So you want to take that into consideration. So for example, and also the content as I mentioned. So for example, Objective 9 says locate and analyze preschool and childcare services. There are 2 options, 9.3, 9 being the objective. 9.3 includes a list of characteristics of good quality childcare and also evaluate a childcare facility. Those are both written tasks. But 9.4 includes an oral task where they would compare childcare facilities in a written way, but then present an oral report on a childcare agency that they found. So that's the content of our civic objectives. Any questions? Oh, okay. Thank you, Rachel, for your advice. I guess I shared the incorrect thing. That's what I did wrong. Thank you. I know it usually works. There we go. Is that better? Yes. Thank you. I just chose the wrong thing. Sorry. Okay. So Karen asks, we only have to give 1 task? No. Each COAAP would have at least 2 tasks per level, and they have to, and whatever tasks are labeled for the level, you need to give for the level. Would a written COAAP be unrevised if online? So if it's a pre-approved objective, and that's what we're talking about, it's approved, which means as soon as you select it, your agency can use it right away. If you decide to revise it by selecting other things, then I'm going to tell you the process for that. You need to get approval for that. This is pre-approved, and you must use it as is with your own content. Okay. I think I answered your question. Thanks. Just meant if done online. So I'm not talking about whether it's done online or not. This is just in general. Okay, we're not talking about online instruction. We're just talking about instruction in general. I hope that's clear. Okay. So let's look at Civic Objective 33, and I did post for you, I think 33.5 or 33.7, one of the COAAPs that you can access if you want to look at a pre-approved COAAP. It's on the Whova site. I uploaded it for you. And so we're going to look at 33, identify and access employment and training resources needed to obtain and keep a job. These slides are also on the Whova site and also online at the CASAS website, or they will be soon. And just to let you know, this is a lot of information, and so I don't expect you to remember this just from 90 minutes of training. And this will be recorded and put online. You can listen again. You can look at the slides and use it as a handbook. So don't worry if you don't get everything in the first go-round. So each civic objective has language and literacy objectives, and those are more like the lesson or unit objectives. So you can see that overarching thing about get and keep a job is very wide, but then the more small language and literacy objectives could be the focus of a one-day lesson or a unit. So number 1 is identify local employment opportunities, the skills and training and education required for them. Identify job titles, responsibilities, and places of work. Identify personal strengths, weaknesses, skills, and past work experience. And notice there's a little asterisk here, and these are, the ones that have the asterisks are acceptable for beginning low students, just so you know. So this is a list you can find online. I'm not sure if I put a link here for it, but I'm sure it'll come up. It's the pre-approved civic objectives list. You should take a look at that. Because each COAAP has just 1 or 2 or 3 language and literacy objectives that relate directly to the assessment. But in terms of 30 hours of instruction that's required, you may want to make it more robust by using some other of the listed civic objectives and language and literacy objectives. Trying to see this question here. There we go. Okay. So let's see if I want to go back. There we go. So, so each COAAP has a civic objective, it has language and literacy objectives, and it tells you the assessment type, either oral, written, role play, portfolio, or observation checklist. Those are our assessment types. And then there are assessment tasks, and the tasks are what students need to complete to show competency in the civic objectives. Remember that there are 2 or 3 for most, and usually 5+ for portfolios. Each level of student needs to do 2 for sure, and maybe a 3rd depending on the COAAP. Each COAAP has a task description. It describes what the students need to do to complete the task. But remember that this is a flexible system, so even though the plan is rigid and tells you what you need to do and the rubric you need to use for it, the exact content is determined by the agency. So it'll say, ask 5 questions, such as. The such as tells you that you can make up, your agency can make up what the 5 questions are, depending on the needs of your students, the needs of your agency, the needs of your community. So the specific content of the instruction and assessment is up to the agency itself. Also in the COAAP is the level of students, so beginning low to advanced. Literacy students can do the instruction, but they cannot participate in the assessment until they score 180 or above. And remember that the level of an ESL student is not determined only by the CASAS test. The CASAS test is one measure, it's a reading measure. But when you place your students in ESL classes, you should be placing them with a reading measure, but also by testing their speaking and listening skills and their writing skills. At the beginning of each test administration manual for the CASAS test, there are suggestions on how to assess your students' other skills. So for English language learners, you must assess all 4 skills. You cannot place them appropriately just by the reading test. Also note that when you're looking at a COAAP, some COAAPs and some tasks are only for students at certain levels. In fact, that is often the case, so don't get confused about that. Make sure you see what the level it's for. And actually, maybe I will, I don't remember if it's here. I think I will take us to a COAAP so you can see what it looks like. So here's 33.5. This is what it looks like if you go to the details page, which I'll show you how to do, and if you can copy it and paste it into a Word document. This is really good too if you want to make revisions. It's easier to do it like this in a Word document. So here we have the objective number, which one it is. This happens to be 33.5. We see the assessment type. We see beginning, low to advanced. Those are the levels. Here are the language and literacy objectives that students need to learn in order to complete the assessment successfully. But again, you may want to add others in if you are doing instruction. So here's the task, identify jobs and job duties. Notice that this is only for beginning low students, not for other students. So only beginning low do this easy task. Okay. And then interpret job openings is task 2. Everyone does it, beginning low to advanced. And it might differentiate, so intermediate, low to advanced do this part, and beginning high does this description, and beginning low does this. So you're going to read carefully what each level of students does. And there's a rubric to show how to rate them. And then another task, I won't go through everything. But then at the end, here's our rating scale, which tells us how many total points there are, and it tells us what points each level needs in order to have a passing score. Okay. So I want to talk a little bit about the rating scale. So again, this is the rating scale for 33.5. The number here is the highest points any one student can get. So if you add up all the tasks, you might get a higher number than this, but each student can only get a certain number because they may not be doing all the tasks. So note that the total points possible is the highest points any one student can get, or one level. Okay, and again, the points for each level are the passing score. Okay, so I want to get a little bit more in depth on this. Again, if this is too complicated, don't worry. But I just want to show you that, so for example, there might be 3 tasks. So 16.5 has 3 tasks. And here are the points. And notice that each level, all the levels are doing each task. So in this case, you would add up 5 plus 18 plus 14, which equals 37. So the highest score any one student could get would be 37. And then here are the passing scores that we figured out for each level. So just to show you how that works, usually, not all, but usually we are looking at if all the students are doing a task, if all the students are doing a task, then we usually expect the advanced to be able to get 90% right, because this is an easier test than an advanced level because everybody's doing it. The intermediate high would get 80%, the intermediate low 70, beginning high 60, and beginning low 50. That's because the big range in abilities. But notice also that sometimes the points have to be adjusted because of our electronic system, there has to be 4 points between each passing score. So this may not be exactly 70% or 60% or 50%, but in order to get these to be 4-point spread, we had to adjust it, just so you know that. Okay, let's look at one that when all levels don't do all the tasks. So it says all COAAPs do not require all levels to do all tasks. So this affects the points. So here we have task 1. Who does it? Beginning low and beginning high only for 10 points. Task 2, beginning low to advanced, does it for 13 points. And intermediate, low, and advanced, do the points possible here. So how many points could a beginning low student get? Why don't you put that in the chat if anybody wants to be brave, and put in the chat, how many points could a beginning low student get on this test? There you go, 23, woohoo! So you added 10 and 13, and that's how you got that. Good. How many points can an advanced student get? You can put that in the chat. 33. So we added 20 and 13. That's right, because those are the tests they do. So the total points possible is 33. That's the highest points any one student. So an advanced student can get the total here, and that's why that is the total point here. Good job. Okay, so those are the points. Okay, let's go on to utilizing. So really important. Some people just, they do their needs assessment. They say their students want 33, and they go, okay, 33.5. But they never read it. And then close to the time of assessment, they go, oh, it's oral. Oh, it's about job applications. So we suggest you don't do that. Please, when you select the COAAP, check how the instruction relates to the tasks. Verify how many tasks are required for the assessment, just like we did just now. Make sure the implementation of the tasks and use of the rubrics is fully understood. If not, email elcivics@casas.org and we will help you with that. Check the passing scores to make sure they're realistic. Now remember, the passing score is what we've decided should be for a pass. If for some reason, and these have been tested over and over again, but if for some reason that's not going to work for you, let us know, and sometimes we can make an exception depending on what's going on at your agency. Make sure that the assessment aligns with the needs expressed in the students. If they wanted an oral task about doing a job interview, then if you haven't chosen that for them, then it doesn't meet their needs. So make sure that it's appropriate to the level of your students, okay? Remember, not all COAAPs relate to all levels. So I think it's 13 that's only for beginning low and beginning high. So you can't choose that for advanced students. So just make sure you've read the assessment and you know what you're getting into. Okay, and if there's questions or concerns, talk to your program specialist. If you don't know who your program specialist is, I will show you how to find that at the end of this. Okay, let me just write that down. Okay, I don't see any questions, so I'll go on. Okay, so I just want to let you know that every year we look at the COAAPs, and sometimes we get feedback from agencies, and they tell us, oh, this is a mistake, or could you add this? So every year we look at them. So every year you need to, on July 1st, everything is new, so you need to know that things you used in 2021 might be revised. Now, that won't be the case for this year because we've been revising all along, and we've just gone through a 2-year revision process from 1 through 75, all of our COAAPs. And they've been there, but you should make sure you check the list to see any changes that have been made. And this is the revision, link to the revisions list. Things that are in bold, and there's a key on the list, you must make the change. That could be a passing score, for example, that was changed. But if it's just some language that was changed just to make it more clear, you don't have to make that change, but just to know that it was done. So every year you should check the revisions to pre-approved COAAPs, okay? Just to make sure you know that everything's up to date. And these are all links you should see. Again, you want to look at the new COAAP in, just like we saw that sample, on the web page, and click on the pre-approved additional assessment plan list so you can see what's there and if there are any changes. We have recently updated everything to match the immigrant integration indicators, so there'll be extra examples to make sure you're thinking about those things, and it may not change the exact instruction or assessment, but just may change some vocabulary words that you want to add in to help your students be more up to date. So this is a living dynamic website, and we're trying to keep it up to date, and we've done a lot of revision over the last 2 years. So if you haven't looked at the pre-approved additional assessment plan list in a couple of years, please do that so you make sure that what you're teaching is up to date. Okay, I want to remind you, especially for the data people, that we have a lot of deadlines. Everyone must select at least one COAAP by October 31st of each year. So starting July 1, those of you who are designated ELC primaries and are designated to select, you need to select one between July 1 and October 31st. Please don't wait. This is just a test to see that you can use the system. So even if you're not 100% sure of what you want, just select something, and then you can always go in and change it. But I feel like we're chasing people towards this deadline to select, and we don't quite understand why you're not doing that. It doesn't have to be perfect. Doesn't have to be perfect. And so I have a question here, 21-22. Did I have the wrong date somewhere? These deadlines are for the current year. So October 31st of 21-22, April 30th, the last day to add, edit, or delete COAAPs for option 1, same deadline for option 2. And then we ask for new COAAPs, if you're trying to do something new, that you submit it earlier because we need time to help you revise. So we have a question, in reporting students who've passed, we should base the student's level on the CASAS test, not our own placement. That is not true. So you should be placing your students, our classes are based on beginning low, beginning high, intermediate low, intermediate high. The CASAS test is just one measure of your placement into a class or into a level if you have a multi-level class. You should be using your placement of the student, the level of placement, as your level that you choose to which assessment you're giving them and which passing score you're giving them. And that level is based on the CASAS score, their listening skills, their speaking skills, and their writing skills. So at the end, I will go over that a little bit more carefully about the levels. Okay, and I should add in a slide about that, which I'll do. Okay, so so you said your agency didn't know that. So how do you well, so for example, in English, it might work for an ABE student who only look at their reading skills, but for English language learners, you need to look at all of their skills. Someone may read very well and not be able to speak a word. You can't put them in an advanced class, right? So they might be in a high beginning class because they have some language, but not enough to be in an advanced class. Okay, I'll go over that a little bit later. Anyways, any questions about these deadlines? Okay, so let's talk about COAAP assessment development. Okay, so here we are on the third step of our requirements. So Catherine says, I find that the CASAS test of receptive skills is usually at least one level below the all-around level of the skills, 4 skills. Yeah, usually with experience you can, and are you saying a listening test? Certainly listening is one of the harder skills, so very often that might be lower than their overall skills, yes. But this is about overall skills because it's testing all the instruction, and the assessment is in all 4 skills: listening, speaking, reading, and writing. So now we're looking at develop, borrow additional assessments. So we're going to talk about developing them, but just to let you know, if your agency isn't able to develop, then you can also borrow them. That's what that is there for. So let's talk about the kind of assessment. It's different from the CASAS test. The CASAS test is a standardized test, very important to show general level skill. But these additional assessments, additional to the CASAS test, are performance-based. Performance-based tests measure the student's ability to apply the skills. So we're talking about being able to access the community in real life, okay? Not just on paper and pencil. None of our tests would be paper and pencil unless it's a written skill, okay, that we're teaching. So we're wanting students to show or demonstrate that they can apply the skills and knowledge learned from a unit or units of study. And it something that challenges them to use their higher order thinking skills to create a product or complete a process, like write a job application or complete a job interview appropriately. So that's what this is all about. So all of our additional assessments, our COAAPs, are performance-based. They relate directly to the COAAP that you've selected. They need to assess how well a learner can interact with or access the community. And they're all evaluated on an individualized basis. We don't evaluate groups. You're evaluating the individual student and how well they can speak, how well they can write an application, how well they can do a job interview or talk to their doctor. We administer the assessments after 30 hours of specific COAAP related instruction. We're not talking about seat time here, we're talking about instruction. And then the assessment must include tasks that learners must perform in real life, as I mentioned, and that it relates both in topic and instruction type. So if you're teaching oral language, then you must test oral language. If you're teaching written language, you must test written language, etc. If a student takes the test and does not pass at their level, then they can be given appropriate instruction and given the test again. But again, only after appropriate instruction. So let's say they were able to complete the job application, but they didn't do so well on the interview. So then you would give them more instruction in interviewing and then give them the test again, that portion of the test. Okay, so this is an example of the way an oral test might be written or done. So you've taught, let's say, 10 illnesses and their symptoms. So that's the instructional piece, 10 illnesses and their symptoms. But we don't need to test everything we've taught. Okay, we want to teach a robust amount of information so the students can act appropriately in the world. But we don't need to test everything. So what you might do is write down on 4 3x5 cards 4 of the 10 illnesses that you have taught about. So then you ask the student, you pull the student out of the classroom, and maybe you have a staff member do the test, or maybe someone else is taking over your class, or the students have a written assignment while you're testing students in a quiet place where other people can't hear. And you have 4 3x5 cards face down on the table. Remember, they're face down with no other identifying nature on top. And you have them select a card. On the card, it says, for example, influenza. So you've taught them influenza as one of your 10 things. And the assessor, as the doctor, says, what's the matter? And then the student responds about influenza. So in this way, they've studied 10 illnesses and their symptoms. You're testing them on one. They don't know which one. And you've given them the opportunity to choose among 4. So when you're testing a whole class of students, you don't want to ask every one of them about influenza. Then you might have copying or learning about the test. So you always want to make it an appropriate testing environment where the student doesn't know exactly what they're going to be tested on. Any questions about that? Okay, so that's an example of an oral test. Oops. Okay, so I just want to give a few aspects of creating your assessments. So you need to write the assessment tasks, and so what the students need to do to complete the task, like complete a job application, and then you're going to customize it. So remember, I might ask 5 questions in my advanced level class, but in your class in Los Angeles, there might be different questions. So each agency can customize the content to your students and the needs. Remember that if you're when you write the assessment, you need to supply and gather all the assessment materials. So if there's pictures or charts or checklists or written instructions to the students, that all needs to be gathered. And if you're doing an oral assessment, you should write an examiner script. You want to make sure that every student is tested the same. So every assessor needs to do it in the same way. So you want to write exactly what the examiner, will say during the assessment, including how many times they can repeat. Because if you repeat it 10 times, you're giving one student a greater advantage than someone who might only allow them 2 repetitions. So be very careful, and the same way with clarification and rephrasing. You might also give some expected student utterances and their rating score. So if the student says this, they get a 1. If the student says this, they get a 2 in terms of points. So that's really good to let the assessors know what they're going to be dealing with. And then you'll want to create a score sheet with rubrics for an oral test. Let me give you an example of a score sheet. So this is from San Diego Community College. They have a score sheet for each student. They put the name, the teacher, the birth date, etc. They have the points needed to pass, the total points. And then they have a place for the points a student will get, and then a circle for whether it's pass or not pass. And this they would hand to the data person to show that the student passed or not. They have a description of what the student needs to do. And then here's a sample score sheet. So all the levels need to state a problem, and they get either 0, 1, or 2 for that. All the students need to identify themselves upon request, and they get points for it. But then for each level, all the levels do up to question 1, but then as you can see, BL drops out here. So this score sheet can be used and the points added up, and then the assessor would go back here and tell the points here, later add them up, checking their score here, whether it's a pass or not, and then hand that sheet to their data person to record it and keep these records so there's no question about what the student did. So that's an oral assessment. For written assessment, again, doesn't have to be done individually. You can give a written assignment to 30 people. They're all doing their individual work. You're testing them individually. Remember, though, that these are real-life assessments. So in real life, we're not usually answering true or false or multiple choice, except on standardized tests, right? So we're not doing that here. This is a performance-based test. So in general, these types of things should not be part of your written assessment. If you have a special case where you think it is part of real life, then you could email elcivics@casas.org or me, lbhoward@casas.org, and check that out. But in general, these are not appropriate for performance-based assessments. Question: do we need approval to change an essay prompt? So the essay prompt, if it comes after such as, you can do whatever you want. So the content is always such as. Let's go back to our 33.5 or 7, whatever it was. I can't remember. 33.5. So here we have an oral assignment. So it says, after doing level-appropriate research using the internet or print on the training or educational pathway of the career student's choice, student will give an oral report on the student's findings. The report will be based on the answers to 4 questions, such as. So the prompt is up to you. Everything after such as is up to you. It has to be about a training or educational pathway. It has to be an oral report, but it can be based on whatever content you give them. James, I hope that answers your question. So that's how we have this flexible nature. So let's go back to the slides. Okay, so whether it's oral or written, there should be detailed directions for examiners or assessors. Remember that, if they're going into a classroom at a certain time, they should know how to access the teacher and talk to the teacher. If this is an outside assessor, not the teacher, him or herself. Sometimes you need to know about the assessment environment. Again, you can't give an oral assessment in a classroom where other students could hear, because then you're giving away the answer to the test. So you have to make sure that the environment is appropriate. the data person and the assessors or teachers need to follow up with written information so that the data person can submit the passes and fails, etc. So whoever's setting up the plan, you need to do that for all of your teachers. And you may need to offer training for your assessors or examiners. Okay, so if you're giving an oral test, you might produce a demonstration video to demonstrate the oral assessment and how it's supposed to go. That's really helpful. But in any case, you want to discuss and rate some student samples for the oral or written test. So this answer gets 2 points, this answer gets 1 point. Again, you need to develop inter-rater reliability. If more than one person is giving the test, they all need to be doing it the same so it's fair and equitable to all the students. Okay, so now just talking about borrowing assessments. So you may not be wanting to write your own assessment. You may want to at least see someone else's. And so you can find out what agencies might be doing the same COAAP as you by going on the EL Civics website. Again, the link is here. And going to COAAP selected by California agencies. By doing that, you can find out everyone that's doing the COAAP. And then you might want to see what agencies are near you, who you might know, and call your colleague to borrow their assessment. Remember, if you're borrowing it, you want to always evaluate the quality, make sure it matches your learner's goals, and make any adjustments that are needed. And then be sure to keep it secure, because agencies are gaining payment points from students who pass these assessments, and so it needs to be secure. Never use it for instruction if someone was kind enough to lend you their assessment. Any questions about creating or borrowing assessments? Okay, we'll move on. So just some other things to consider, who are your assessors going to be? How are you going to train them? What the teachers should know about the assessment, if they are the assessor or if they're just assisting the assessor, where the test is going to be given and how often it's going to be given. That should all be things that you are considering. On the Civic Participation website, you might see implementing performance-based assessments and see look at more closely at those, what you need to do to make this happen. Any other questions about assessments? So now we want to move on to instruction. So once you've developed your assessment, again, this is backwards buildup, or it's a way to have your assessment and know what you need to teach in order for your students to pass. Because it's performance-based, we are teaching to the test. But remember, we're not giving the answer to the test. So as I showed you with that oral, you may be teaching 10 things, but you're only testing one of them. So again, this is the fourth step: plan and offer instruction. So the instruction should be aimed towards beginning low to advanced learners. Again, literacy students can participate, but they can't get payment points until they score 180 or above. And the instruction is to help the students access the community by participating in real or simulated communication or interactions. And I think that's about it. Okay, remember that your instruction should include all 4 language skills, because all ESL classes contain listening, speaking, reading, and writing. Even if your COAAP just assesses one skill, you need to use the other skills as part of appropriate instruction. Okay, and you can see the pre-approved civic objective list to know what the language and literacy objectives are. I'm going to show you a picture of them in a minute. And remember that your instruction needs to be at least 30 hours of content specific to the selected COAAP. It's not just any instruction, it's content related. Okay, so then you want to write or collect robust instructional materials for 30 hours of instruction. that teach the learners the content of the objective. And you must teach everything that's going to appear in the assessment. There should be no new information in the assessment, right? All the vocabulary that's going to come up in the assessment should be taught ahead of time. You should include plentiful and varied practice activities that prepare the students for the assessment, and any kind of adjunct information that would be helpful to them to make up your 30 hours. And you, in general, want to include more language and literacy objectives than are those listed in the COAAP. We used to list a lot more, but we realized that it could be confusing, so we only list the language and literacy objectives that are directly related to the assessment. But you should be including more. And so here's an example of 12.4. In 12.4, only 5 of the 12 language and literacy objectives are listed in the COAAP. But you can use this list to help you see what other things you might teach. And I don't think this is a good example of it, but there are now, we've, as I mentioned, added to the language and literacy objectives immigrant integration indicator information. So you'll want to be looking at this list, especially now since it's been revised, to see what kinds of other things you should be adding to the examples, especially if you've been using a COAAP or instructional materials for a long time. You'll want to be looking at this list and see if there's any kind of new vocabulary you should be adding in to meet the immigrant integration indicators. You can find some lesson plans, one for each of these areas, at the OTAN website. They're pretty old now, these materials. They've been there for maybe 10 or 15 years, but it could give you an example of how some materials should look. But newer is our new EL Civics Exchange, and I don't know if any of you were in our presentation in the last hour. We are developing a repository for original EL Civics instructional materials that are created by your colleagues. California, we owe a title to EL Civics agencies, and we want them to serve as a model of excellent materials. So even if you don't want to use them, you can see what excellent materials should look like. And but if you want to use them or switch up what you're using, you can see what's there. Again, we are just at the very beginning. Only one set of materials is there right now. I think it's for 48.1. But we hope to be building this, and this is going to be an ongoing project that we're building. If you have any great materials you've written in the last 5 years, again, they need to be original to your agency. And also remember that, you know, everything that is written for this project is paid for by the federal government, so it becomes public domain, so you should have no problem sharing these materials on the website. This repository is a joint project between CASAS and OTAN. We've been working collaboratively for more than a year on this, and it's accessible now. You can go to elcivics at .otan.us to see it, to see what's there, and then the submission section, if you want to submit any materials, will open July 1. So we hope that'll be good for you, and we'd love to have your feedback. Any questions about assessment or instruction? I want to talk a little bit about revising COAAPs, because as I've mentioned, you may want to just select what's there, but you may feel that they don't meet the needs of your students, and we're so lucky that our system is flexible. So you can revise, and this is called option 2, you can revise approved or pre-approved COAAPs to meet the needs of your students. So you can look at the COAAPs that are there and select tasks from COAAPs that are already written and say maybe task 1 from 2.2 and task 4 from 2.3. I want to put those together into a COAAP. That's fine. Or you can write a new task, either all new tasks or use one that's already written and add another one. So that's very flexible. If you want to do that, then you need to check out all that's there first, decide what your task should be, and then this second item here, write a brief description of the proposed revisions and send it to elcivics@casas.org. One of our program specialists will read your submission and get back to you with suggestions, either an okay to go ahead or suggestions on how to change it. And they'll work with you on setting up your new COAAP and work with you on approval. And once it's approved, you can submit it into option 2, or these days, very often, if the COAAP is acceptable for other agencies too, we might submit it for you into the pre-approved so that more agencies could use it. But if you do submit it into option 2, you need to notice this item in red, that you must select it every year. So if you already have COAAPs that were written by your agency previously, be sure you select them every year, because otherwise they won't be in the system. Okay. So this is just talking about how you can revise. Again, replace tasks with one from other related COAAPs, write new tasks, or use a combination of them. Then revise the rating scale if needed, and again, your program specialist could help you with that, and then submit into option 2. And you can contact me directly, or you can just write to elcivics@casas.org. Okay, so we're talking about new COAAPs here. So any new COAAP must be something that doesn't meet students' needs that are already in the 59 civic objectives that we already have. If you think that they don't, for example, Torrance Adult School added digital literacy, and certainly now we are adding in new training COAAPs, workforce training COAAPs, those wouldn't be there either, and so you could write a new one. The same process happens. You write a brief description of the tasks you want and then work with a program specialist. So just a reminder to select your COAAP every year if you have an option 2 or option 3. And if it means that selecting it means you'll have more than 10 COAAPs, then you need to ask your CDE consultant for permission. So I want to talk to you about, we especially want to encourage people who might have a new career pathway to revise COAAPs or write COAAPs for workforce training. So I wanted to give you an example of how you might do that. And you want to either add tasks to current COAAPs or write new COAAPs that directly relate to the training and then directly relate to the model that you're wanting to use, alternating teaching or co-teaching. And the way you might do that is to look at the curriculum of your vocational class. So this happens to be an example from San Diego Community College District, Donna Price, and her curriculum for the ESL portion of a home health aid class. And she found these content areas that the training teacher was teaching. And so they had a whole unit on infection control, they had a unit on interpersonal skills, they had a unit on body mechanics, and a unit on vital signs. And these were all things that the ESL students who were in this home health aid class needed English support for. So if you had a curriculum like that, you could write a COAAP for each of those units. Or you could have multiple unit information in a COAAP, but let's say you wanted to write one for each. So you might write 3 COAAPs for this training that would go along with it. And so they would have the content needed to learn by the students, and each can claim 30 hours of instruction. And you would be supporting the workforce training class with this content that comes from the training. And then you could pay for the instruction with the payment points that you earn by developing these 243 COAAPs and assessing the students in them. So for example, a whole COAAP could be about infection control, and the first task could be demonstrate, describe orally, and or write about hand washing techniques and other infection control strategies. And then task 2 could be report about steps taken to control infection. That could be a role play. So, this may be 30 hours may be too much to talk about these infection control, but maybe it would be the right amount. That would be up to your training teacher to let you know. So there are just a couple of extra examples. You could write one on body mechanics. You could write one on taking vital signs, or you could have one COAAP that had 2 tasks, taking vital signs and body mechanics, for example, if that was what needed. So I just want to give you some examples of what you might do. And I wanted to let you know that a number of COAAPs have been written in workforce training related objectives. So right now we have COAAPs in early childhood education, healthcare, which includes personal care aid, building and construction trades, information and communication technologies, manufacturing and product development, which is more of a safety one. And then we have an accounting unit also. So we have these, and we would like more. So if you are doing a workforce training class, rather than using a general COAAP like 53, which is customer care, or 33, getting and keeping a job, we'd love you to write one specific to the single set of learning objectives for your training. So let us know if you want to do that, and we will help you do that. Any questions? Okay. So we have time to do the data and talking about that. We also have time to go to the website. We do have some data submission people here, and those of you, the information I'm going to give is general enough that you might be interested in it. So I'm going to go ahead with this data, and then if we still have time, I will go to the website and show you more about the website. So let's talk about the data collection and submission related to EL Civics. So it's a pay-for-performance system, different from other states. Other states very often just gave the money, but we required performance. So the student must demonstrate their performance of being able to do these tasks. And if they demonstrate it, they can earn up to 6 payment points per year, 3 from 231 funds and 3 from 243 funds. And there's a list of 231 funded objectives and 243 funded objectives, again, linked here. All of the COAAPs are 231 funded, and some of them, 29, are 243 funded. Looks like I repeated this somehow. Sorry about that. I will take care of that. Okay, record keeping. So once you've given the assessment, you need to keep records. So agencies need to keep one folder for each EL Civics class, not individual student. And it contains whatever assessment you gave them, the criteria that the student used to score the students, and a score sheets or samples of student work, at least 1 pass and 1 fail. You can keep that for 3 years plus the current year. And you can keep it digitally or in print, so in a file cabinet somewhere in print or in a digital folder. But if you keep a digital folder, make sure you have a backup, because you're required to be able to show that if you have an audit of some kind. And the 3 years plus the current year is for auditing purposes, unless you know that your agency is in an ongoing audit, and then you need to keep it for 5 years. And there is a management bulletin you can link to here that would give you more information about that. But record keeping is an important part of this process, because you need to be able to demonstrate that you actually did do the assessment. Okay. Once your agency selects COAAPs, you need to be able to download them, and the download instructions are here on the website. So in the first 4 sections of the website, the third one has this download COAAPs instruction. So once you select, go here, and it tells you how to download them. And that's how the data system knows you've selected those, and why you can then report pass fail. Okay, so this is instructions on how to download it. I'm not going to go through it, but these are the steps. But I do want to talk a little bit about form numbers, because one of the things you need to do when you're submitting your data is to know the form number. The form number is listed on the COAAP. Let me show you. But you may not be looking at the COAAP, but here's the form number. 33.5 is 335C. Okay, so it's always there. You can find it. But you can also just follow these rules on the slide here. And this is all in the FAQs for civic participation. So again, you just move the decimal point over. So 1.4 becomes 014. C, they always have the C. 70.3 becomes 703. So we know which COAAP you're using. If they are revised by your agency, they just have the civic objective number. Okay. So if it's yours specifically, it becomes a CX. If it's an option 2. Okay. And then you are allowed to do multiple assessments in the same civic objective. So that becomes a little complex. So if they do multiple, that's not a problem. 701, 702, 703. That's easy. But if it's a combination of revised and they all just have this number 70, then you would need to label them either first, second, or third and have a CX after it. Or if you've done both pre-approved and agency created, then it would look like this. So this is a little complex. If you're a data person, you can call me or ask questions, but this is all in the FAQs if you need to look it up. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about designating classes, because we often get questions about this. If a civic participation class will give instruction in both 231 and 243 designated civic objectives, you need to set up 2 classes, because in order to request payment points in 231 and 243, the class needs to be designated 231 or 243. So you need to designate the classes, and you can designate either civic participation in IELCE, or you could also designate citizenship preparation. Be sure that this is ESL or ELL for your instructional program as part of it. So this gives instruction about how to do it. So basically, if you have a class that runs Monday through Thursday from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. and you want to teach both a 231 and a 243 COAAP in that class, you could designate the first hour and a half as a 231 class and the second hour and a half as a 243 class. And the examples of that would be here. Okay, so you set up one class from 9 to 10:30 and you designate it as 231, and then another class from 10:30 to 12 and designate it as 243. You could do the same thing with citizenship, have the first class be civic participation from 9 to 10:30, and then a citizenship class be from 10:30 to 12, if you want to run both of those with the same group of students. So I'll leave, there's an example 1 and an example 2. I'll let you read those if you need it. These slides show you how to manually enter the additional assessment score. So I'll just leave that for you to look at. But I want to point out the resources. So the EL Civics page, which I'm going to go to in a minute, has a lot of information for you. Again, here's the link at CASAS.org. And there's a lot of webinars and the slides from webinars, so you can get training on your own time. Very important piece of information is the FAQs. Again, this is updated every year, so take a look at it. During the year, if anything changes, we'll put it in green. So if you've read it on July 1st, if you check it out a few months later, just glance through to see if anything's in green. That's what you know is new. And also know that we have EL Civics network meetings. If you want to join the EL Civics network meeting, please email your contact information to elcivics@casas.org. These meetings are held monthly and they have a lot of great information about EL Civics. And we try to also bring other agencies to talk about their materials or their programs. We did a lot on remote instruction this year and how agencies were dealing with it. Next week on June 30th at 1 p.m., we have a meeting and we're going to be talking about Creative Commons licensing and accessibility, both of which are requirements for our new EL Civics Exchange. Penny Pearson from OTAN is going to talk about that. So if you want that information, if you want to submit materials to the Exchange, you need to have that information. Please register for the meeting so we can keep track of your attendance. And to let you know that CASAS is funded by the California Department of Education to provide training and technical assistance in EL Civics, and we give you information on instruction, assessment, and data collection. If you have questions about policy or fiscal issues, you need to contact your CDE consultant. And again, here's the web page that you should go to for all of this information. California Civic Participation IELCE webpage, and here's an address if you have any questions. And I recently wrote an article on EL Civics, and it was published in the COAAP journal in the winter. If you want to get information from soup to nuts about EL Civics and its history, this article would be a good experience for you. And your agency may already have a copy. You could just look it up. So, questions before I go to the website. Okay, we have a few minutes left. I'm just going to give you a quick tour of the website, and then we'll finish up. If you can unmute, you can feel free to unmute yourself. And if you want to ask a question. There it is. Okay, so here's the CASAS website. If you scroll down on the left-hand side, you'll come to this California EL Civics. We're going to click on that. And here you see the menu of all the items that you would need. So anything about remote testing, if you want to know about the IELCE report, if you want to learn more about citizenship preparation, and this is the page I've been talking about, California Civic Participation in IELCE. But before we go there, I just want to point this out. If you want to know who your program specialist is, click here and you'll get their contact information. Okay, let's go to the California Civic Participation in IELCE and just show you here that these first 4 items are the most important. That's why they're first. Here's the pre-approved additional assessment plan list that we've been talking about and the sample I showed you. So we're going to be looking at, let's go back to 14. If you put in the number of the COAAP you want, and then it comes up here. I'm going to go back to 33, because that's the one we've been talking about. Hit go. Make sure that you've got the correct year. So right now we're in 2021, but on July 1 you'll be able to look at 21, 22 here and see the new ones. Okay, and if we go down here to 33.5 and we click over here at View Details, then you'll see the COAAP assessment I showed you earlier and that I've posted in the Whova app, so you can access that. Okay, so that's that. If you are going to select COAAPs on July 1st, then you would go to this second bullet here. If you want to see what your agency has already selected, you'd go here. And then I had talked to you about borrowing materials that you could find at the California, a COAAP selected by California agencies. You would go to this second one here. And then if you wanted to find, let's say you're doing 33.5, you would scroll down to 33.5. Only one agency is doing it. And you would find out that this is Boat People of Orange County. So if you want to ask them for their materials or their assessment, you could contact them. Okay. In the next section, there's a lot of PDFs that are important. The FAQ that I was telling you about, you can download here. This document about revisions to COAAPs, I mentioned to you that every year we revise the COAAPs. So this is a list of what the revisions are. This is the Civic objective list, which shows you the language and literacy objectives. So if you want to see that, we'll scroll down. I think hopefully you're still seeing my screen. Let me know if you're not. But I'm going to scroll down to 33. That's what we were looking at. And you'll notice that 33 has a lot of language and literacy objectives. How many in total? 18. And you'll notice that if something's in bold, we just recently revised that. And if it's in italics, that means it's new. So we have a couple of new objectives. The new ones we've added, or the new information we've added, often has to do with the immigrant integration indicator. So this one says access the Employment Development Department or other agencies to get information on various services, look for a job, or file for unemployment. I think unemployment, we hadn't put that there yet, so that's good. We had some, I wanted to show you in 48, we had some new ones. There we go. So in 48, we did a lot about adding in the new items about remote learning. Identify or demonstrate the tools for active participation in a synchronous or asynchronous online class. Identify and demonstrate the use of independent online learning resources. Analyze and evaluate information found online. So these are things we've added to sort of keep up with digital instruction. So this is really good for you to look at least once a year, or if you're developing your COAAPs. Okay, so that's the section here, a lot of information. The next section has to do with all the webinars we've given. So this presentation will be moved here soon, but right now we have a previous one. All the webinars are here on the left and the slides that go along with them on the right, so you can always be accessing this. Every month there are California AFLA WIOA meetings, and all of the slides and recordings are here on the website. So if you can't go to the meeting, you might want to either watch it on this YouTube link, or you could download the slides and just glance through them, make sure you have all the information you need for each of the trainings every month. So very important. Okay, any questions about the website or anything you'd like me to show you? Or any questions about the presentation? Can I share this link? Sure. I will put it in the chat. Remember, all you have to do is CASAS.org and go to civic participation. But there you go. Okay, anybody else? Questions? Let me go back to my slides. And just remind you that that we have completed our objectives, that you got information on selecting civic objectives and additional assessment plans. We talked about implementing COAAP instruction at your agency and developing or borrowing COAAP assessments. We've identified the important aspects of developing integrated EL Civics assessments. And would you like to put in the chat something new that you've learned today? I would love to hear any of your aha moments. You learned something and you'd like to share that with me right now. I'd love to hear what was important to you or what one thing you learned. If you'd like to put that in the chat, that would be great. And while you're doing that, I will just suggest to you that you share this information with other people at your agency so that it just doesn't stop with you. And then I'm also going to put my address there if you'd like to contact me. So Cindy says, what if we didn't separate the classes this year, but we did do the instruction and COAAPs? So you're talking about you didn't label them as 231 or 243. I think you can still do that. I think you can still, if you want to go back into your data, I think you can still do that. I would suggest you contact your program specialist to make sure, but I think until you submit the data completely on July 15th, you can go back and do that, and that will allow you to collect those payment points. This is really a question for your data person, or it would be a question for Jay Wright. So he's our data person. I would email Jay Wright at CASAS.org and ask him for assistance on what to do. He would know how to help you. And Stephanie says the assessment scoring sheet is something new that she learned. That's great for oral assessments. Thank you for telling us, Stephanie. You love Jay Wright. Good. I'm glad you do. He's going to give you an earful about what to do and what you can do. Any other questions or comments? Anything else you learned that you're taking away today? Well, I hope this has been useful to you. We have a whole day of conference presentations tomorrow, starting at 8 o'clock. I will be on each and every hour, so I hope I see you tomorrow as well. And thank you so much for participating in this course today. Eileen is going to tell you about the evaluation, if you wouldn't mind filling that out. So Eileen, take it away.
Thank you so much, Lori. Please remember to complete your session evaluation. You can complete the evaluation through the rate session button on the session page or through the surveys tab on the main navigation. Thank you so much.